Hello, it's Miss Fincham. Today we're starting Unit 2 by covering Topic 1.2, Terrestrial or Land-Based Biomes. Thanks to Jordan Smeets for the slides and note outlines that we use in this class. Our objective for the day is to be able to describe the global distribution and the environmental conditions of land-based or terrestrial biomes. We will talk about how the plants and animals that live in a biome are adapted to that unique climate. We will go over major mesonobiomes for apes, and we'll talk about how the worldwide distribution of biomes is subject to change if our climate changes. Finally, the environmental science skill will be explaining an environmental concept or process. Biomes are areas that share a combination of average yearly temperature and precipitation, also known as climates. This is really important to point out, as climate is just a combination of average temperature and precipitation trends over a year. We can look at some examples of well-known biomes. We have the rainforest, which is a biome that over the course of the year is going to have really high rainfall, as well as really warm temperatures. Whereas the desert is going to be a biome that is characterized by very low precipitation. Deserts also have high temperatures, but that low precipitation is the big distinguisher between the tropical rainforest and the desert. It is really important to point out that the community of organisms that live in biomes are uniquely adapted to the climate of those biomes. Instead of thinking of the biome and trying to memorize what organisms can survive there, just remember that any organism in a biome must be uniquely adapted to survive in those conditions. For example, here we have camels and cacti. Camels have humps which store energy in the form of fat for times when they are unable to find energy for a long period of time. Cacti have thick, waxy cuticles or coats that basically prevent water loss through evaporation. These are both adaptations that allow those organisms to survive the harsh, dry conditions of the desert. We also have shrubs and wildflowers. They are going to have long, deep roots that store a lot of energy so that when there are wildfires that devastate the landscape of the grasslands that they live in, they're going to be able to quickly regrow because they have stored so much energy deep in the ground and the roots. The organisms of a biome are uniquely adapted to survive the conditions, meaning the climate of that biome. Biomes have very distinct characteristics, and the two most important characteristics of a biome are its temperature and precipitation. In fact, they are the defining characteristics. If we look at the graph here, we will see that we have different ranges of both temperature and precipitation. For instance, if we look at the tropical seasonal forest, also known as the savanna, we will notice that they range in annual precipitation from 60 to 70 centimeters of annual precipitation all the way up to 280 centimeters of precipitation. Then if we look at the temperature, we will notice that those tropical seasonal forests are going to range from around 18 degrees Celsius all the way up to 29 degrees Celsius. Keep in mind that all of these biomes are defined by the range of precipitation and temperature found in it. What we will notice is that these temperature and precipitation ranges will also predict where on Earth we can find the biomes. We can look at the biomes mapped across our surface and we'll see that there is a very predictable pattern. If we look at biomes such as the tundra and the boreal forest, our previous graph informs us that they are very low in temperature and precipitation. Since they are also cold, we're going to see them further away from the equator, concentrated around 60 degrees latitude. If we look at the temperate biomes, we're going to see them concentrated on the middle latitudes between 30 and 60 degrees. This is because these are latitudes that receive a moderate amount of rainfall and moderate temperature year-round. They are going to be reasonably warm, but they are going to get somewhat cool in the winter. And finally, we have the tropical biome. This would be the tropical rainforest and the tropical seasonal forest, or the savanna. Notice that they are concentrated around the equator. This is going to be characterized by really warm temperatures because it gets the most direct sunlight and really high precipitation. Instead of trying to memorize all of these different biomes, we need to think about how these patterns of temperature and precipitation are influenced by the distance that we are from the equator, and that is going to tell us where we are going to find different biomes. Colder, drier biomes up near 60 degrees north, so the further away from the equator, we'll see the temperature in those biomes to be much cooler, whereas those in the middle latitudes of around 30 to 60 degrees will be more temperate, and those around the equator will be more tropical and be really warm and have really rainy seasons. Another very important characteristic of biomes is their nutrient availability. This is because plants need soil nutrients in order to grow. The availability of the nutrients in the soil is ultimately going to determine which plants and how many species of plants can survive in different biomes. We have a great example here when we look at the tundra. You can memorize that the tundra has a lot of snow and ice, so it doesn't have as many plant species, but we want to try to actually understand the reasoning behind that. Since the soil in the tundra is permanently frozen year-round, that limits the decomposition of organic matter, which recycles nutrients. Since those soils are so frozen for so much of the year, we do not recycle our nutrients. This means that they have low nutrient levels in the soil. This is also going to lead to low water availability due to the water being frozen. Finally, this is going to result in very few plants able to survive these conditions. We can see here that the active layer, or the layer of the soil that thaws out each year and is available for plant growth, is very small compared to the permafrost. Again, that results in very few species of plants being able to survive here, and therefore fewer animal species as well. Now we can look at a few more examples, such as the tropical rainforest. Even though it has a ton of plant growth, you might think it's really nutrient-filled soil, when actually it's going to be quite nutrient poor, and that's because there's so many plants that are competing for the nutrients that as soon as they're made available in the soil, they get absorbed from the soil. We also have the boreal forest. Boreal forests are found in colder climates. They are going to be dominated by coniferous trees, pine trees, aspen, spruce, and they're going to also have nutrient-poor soils, but for a different reason. It's because the temperature is so low for much of the year that the decomposers like earthworms and fungi are not going to be able to break down dead organic matter fast enough to cycle those nutrients quickly. Finally, we have the temperate forest. Those are the forests that you are used to seeing in Indiana and across much of the U.S. They have very high nutrient levels in the soil, and that's because they have broad leaves like oaks and maples that drop their leaves each fall. This leads to a lot of organic matter on the forest floor, and they have moderate temperatures, which is going to allow for a faster rate of decomposition, which makes those nutrients available in the soil. This is a great example of how another biome characteristic, nutrient availability, ultimately determines which plants and which animals can survive in the biome. Finally, we will talk about how biomes can shift in their locations. That is because climate is not stable on Earth. Climate is subject to human activities that are changing it rapidly right now, and as the climate continues to warm, that will shift biomes such as the boreal forest further north. As these soils that used to be frozen for much of the year are thawing out and are able to have the large tree species of a boreal forest now grow in those conditions, they are also going to lose some of their southern range as it becomes too warm for the trees that dominate that boreal forest biome, such as aspen and spruce. We have here the current range from 1971 to 2000 of the aspen, which again is a very characteristic tree species found in the boreal forest, versus the predicted change in the biome from 2071 to 2100. We notice that the predicted range is far to the north again and is due to the soils that were mostly frozen, thawing out and enabling tree growth for the north. A lot of those southern regions that we see in the northern U.S. and in southern Canada are becoming too warm for these tree species. We can see an actual picture in this progress happening in these photos of the same exact Arctic plot of land in 1962 and then again in 2004. We can see that the forest is slowly creeping northward as global warming makes those previously too cold soils warm enough for the boreal forest tree species. Our practice FRQ for topic 1.2 today will involve the skill of concept explanation. I want you to identify one characteristic of a biome and explain how that characteristic determines the community of organisms that are found in that biome. Remember to scan your notes into Canvas when you finish.